sun is never setting, where all our curses turn to blessings, we'll find we have lived in answers to. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. World-class music, as usual. One of my favorite poems, by the way. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Stay. Whoa, boy. There. Wow. This week, I kind of got the message that my talk was going to be about love, and I realized I would be speaking to the choir. And so I was really thinking about this, though, and really I was reminded of an experience that I had when I was in ministerial school. And I had the great privilege and opportunity to be taught Bible by Sally Taylor. How many of you are familiar with Sally Taylor? I know many of you are, because Sally was a minister here in Austin for a number of years, and just an amazing Bible teacher, just a very powerful woman. And amazing and great passion about the Bible and the spiritual and metaphysical understandings of the Bible, as well as the historical understanding of the Bible. And one of the things I remember in our class, Sally asked the question, what is the central theme of Jesus' ministry? And several people had several thoughts and ideas about that, and I raised my hand and I said, well, to me, the central theme has always been about love. And she said, no, 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 no. Just like that. So I sat up and paid attention. And she went on to explain that the central theme of Jesus' teaching was the kingdom of God. Yeah. And I was I'll be honest with you, I was a little taken back by the way she responded to that, but I paid attention. And bless her heart, I'll tell you, and the more I looked at that and the more I thought about it, I was a little resistant at first because I was pretty convinced it was love. But the more I looked at that and thought about it, I knew that she was right, that really is the central message of what Jesus was trying to teach. He was trying to teach the kingdom of heaven. And so I really thought about that and reflected on that and thought about, what does that mean? What does it mean? What is the central theme of what Jesus was trying to show us and trying to tell us? And as I thought about the kingdom of heaven, I always go back to Charles Fillmore, of course, who's the co-founder of Unity, and I love the Revealing Word. How many of you guys, if you're not familiar and don't have the Revealing Word, you want to get this resource because it's one of the most useful and practical understandings metaphysically, that and the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, naturally. And let me find my page here. So I looked up the word heaven and what it means metaphysically. And according to Charles Fillmore, he says the Christ consciousness. Heaven is the Christ consciousness. It's the realm of divine mind, a state of consciousness in harmony with the thoughts of God. Heaven is everywhere present. It is the orderly, lawful adjustment of God's kingdom in man's mind, body, and affairs. And Jesus, of all those claiming intimate acquaintance with spiritual things, gave heaven definite location. The kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:21. Heaven is within every one of us, a place of consciousness, a sphere of mind, having all the attraction described or imagined as belonging to heaven. But this kingdom within is not material, it is spiritual. And so my lesson today really is about the kingdom of heaven. And I think about that, and there's another, when I look at the kingdom of heaven, what Charles said about that, he said the kingdom of God, first of all, is the Christ consciousness, the kingdom of heaven. And then he says the kingdom of heaven is the realm of divine ideas, producing their expression, perfect harmony. And it is within man, or humankind, to modernize and to desex the language. It's within humankind, it's within us, it's within each one of us, but it's also within us as a collective. And so, as I reflected on this and thought about it, I thought, well, okay. I came across several things that kind of made me think about Sally Taylor and her teaching on this and my response and how what she said was, I really think, very true, is that Jesus really was trying to teach us how we can each know and experience this Christ consciousness, this kingdom of God, this presence of the divine. And that everything he said and did in all of his life and all of his actions and everything about him was about sharing that consciousness, that energy, that awareness. Jesus said in Matthew 6:33, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." All the things, of course, are just the blessings that we're seeking in life. And if we seek first this consciousness, then all of those things that we think that we want and need in order to experience well-being and in order to experience good, in order to experience blessings, will come into our experience. Now, he didn't say seek only that, but he did seek that first. Make that the most important thing. The most important thing is to seek that connection that we have with the divine, to seek that connection with Spirit. And I got to thinking about what is it that Jesus was teaching of us about how we can do that. And so I kind of got it back into my first answer. That there really is a way that my answer wasn't wrong, but it was not necessarily the central theme of his message, but it is a way that we can experience that presence, the way that we can experience this. And so I was thinking about love, and I came across this story, and it was someone who wrote this story and said that it was a man, his cellular phone had quit, and he was driving home on their anniversary to have dinner with his wife and got caught in freeway traffic and was caught in the gridlock and was just stuck there and was really, upset because he wanted to be there and have his anniversary dinner with his wife. And so he didn't know what to do, but he noticed that he had his laptop there and he was sitting there in traffic and he said, well, on my laptop, I wrote out a note and I had a portable printer there. So I printed out a note and I pasted it to the back of my window that said, someone please call my wife and let her know that I'm on my way, that I'm stuck in traffic, and that I love her. And eventually, finally got home, and his wife, she was just afraid that she's going to be upset and mad and everything, and she rushed to the door and gave him the biggest hug. And he said, well, thank you. And she said, oh, it was so wonderful. 70 people called me to tell me that you love me. I love that story. People love, don't they? We love love. And love is an important thing in our lives. It's an important gift that we have. It's a spiritual quality and character. It's one of the 12 powers that we talk about in unity. It is it's an amazing gift in and of itself, but it's also a key, isn't it? It's a key that moves us in our own energy and our own consciousness. And it's one that we can use and practice to moving ourselves into a higher, a different, more conscious, and a more aware state of being. I came across this wonderful story, and I know many of you will appreciate this. It says, a man said, if love can create the moon and stars, is there anything love can't do? And the cat said, it definitely cannot forget to feed the kitty. For all you cat lovers, you know what I'm talking about out there. So, you know, Jesus talked to us about seeking first the kingdom. Eric Butterworth said, keep in mind that heaven is, as Jesus uses the term, is not a place in the sky or a reward for afterlife. The word heaven comes from a Greek root that means expanding. And thus Jesus was talking about the expanding possibility and potential within every individual, within you. And heaven is the potential of the Spirit in you that is wrapped in your human nature. It's the potential of the human spirit wrapped in your human nature. And the thing that releases that potential is the energy, the practice, the consciousness of love. Now, I have to say that I do feel like I'm preaching to the choir, because this is some of the most loving folks I'm talking to here. I'm so blessed to be a part of this wonderful, loving group of people, and I feel very blessed to be a part of that. And so I got to thinking about, okay, well, what are some steps that Jesus talks about that we can take in order to experience that connection we have with the divine, with our source, with the creative possibility and potential that's within us, with the kingdom of heaven that's always expanding. And it's always trying to expand and always a part of this expanding possibility of blessings of good in our lives. And I figured out that there are really 4 simple steps. You guys ready for 4 simple steps for moving into the kingdom? Okay. The first step, very simple. Love God more than anything else that you've ever loved. Isn't that what he said? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. That's number 1. Love God. Well, let's think about that. How does that help us move into the kingdom? Well, first of all, it's important for us to recognize that we live in a place and a world that is based upon spiritual principles and spiritual laws. And they're always working, aren't they? And one of the laws of spirit is, as Jesus said, as you sow, so shall you reap. Right? And so if we want to experience more of the presence of the divine, interestingly enough, the divine, just like in the world, the divine is always loving, but it's always reflecting back to us what we ourselves are putting out. And so if we want to experience more of the divine, what opens the doors to that is loving the divine. And loving the divine is a practice. It's a spiritual practice, isn't it? And it's not one that we necessarily always remember, because we get so caught up in just simply trying to make it through each day sometimes. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we get so caught up in the things of the life and the things of the world. We get so caught up in doing our jobs. We get so caught up in making sure that the kids are at the right place, or that, you know, that we're taking care of our aging parents. And we get so caught up in all of the activity of life that we oftentimes forget this opportunity to experience more of the presence of God just by stopping and taking a moment, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 20, to simply reflect on and set in an awareness of loving this creative power and force and source in our lives. But when we do this, we are participating in the energy of creation in a way that we are bringing even more of that experience and expression of the divine into our experiences, but we're also sharing that. We're in a sense, we're kind of refilling the inkwell, you might say, in life. We can, I've got a wonderful printer at home that I have to constantly be refilling the inkwell. You guys know what I'm talking about? I mean, it prints out some beautiful things if I'm willing to refill the inkwell. Otherwise, they tend to get a little faded sometimes. You know what And so it's so important for us to take that time to refill the inkwell of our energy and our consciousness. And we do that by loving the divine, loving spirit, by sitting in meditation and prayer, by taking the time to really consciously be a participant in tuning into and aligning ourselves with that knowing. So, number one, love God more than anything else. Number two, he says, the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. Love yourself and love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. So the second one is loving yourself. It's important for us to love our being. Now, some of you say, well, you can't do that. That's being selfish. And I'm going to suggest to you that the opposite is true. By not loving yourself, you are depriving the world of the blessings that you are created to bring into this experience and to express in life. Now, it's important for us to not let our ego run rampant with this. I mean, we can certainly do that. But that's not necessarily self-love, is it? That's really trying to make up for what we think is not lovable, isn't it? And so when we find ourselves, feeling that we need to somehow love ourselves and puff ourselves up in some way, we're really just trying to overcome a feeling or a sense that we're not lovable. And part of our healing work, part of our transformation is learning to let that go. And learning to let go of all the judgments that we have held about ourselves. And of course, then loving our neighbor. Loving our neighbor as an expression of and a child of God more than anything else. Yes, more than anything else than we've ever loved. And then loving our enemy. Okay, wait a minute.
That's the hard one.
I came across a story of a man and a woman who went to their pastor and they were going to get a divorce. And the pastor kind of asked, okay, well, can't you guys just try one more time? Couldn't you just try to love each other, a little bit more? Love your spouse like you love yourself. And they said, no, I can't do that. That's too much. Well, could you, love your spouse as much as you at least love your neighbor? No, couldn't do that. Okay, well then just love your spouse at least as much as you love your enemy. That seems to be a challenge when we think about that. And I was really reflecting on this as a way of entering the kingdom. And one of the things that really occurred to me is that we really are opening the gates to our higher self, to our higher consciousness, when we're in a place where we are practicing being in that place of love for all of creation. And that includes those things that appear and seem to be against us. One of the things that I did a series a couple years ago on the Eye of the Storm by Reverend Gary Simmons, and there's a very powerful understanding awareness is that nothing and no one is against us. That's a challenging sometimes thing for us to consider. We sometimes think we see evidence of that all over the place, don't we? And so part of learning to love Jesus really referred to it more, the term that he used really was more adversary rather than enemy. And we can see a lot of things and experiences in our lives as being adversarial, something that seems to be against us. And part of our shifting in our awareness and our consciousness of the presence of the divine is to recognize that in and through all things, there is something there that is for us. And to be open to the possibility of discovering that, we have to be willing to set aside a lot of the resistance that we have to whatever seems to be against us. And love is one of the ways that we shift that awareness. And be open to the possibility of loving, not necessarily the experience itself, but loving the possibilities of good that can come out of that experience. One of the things I came across in thinking about loving God, and Jesus saying loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, I came across a story about a master and a disciple. And the disciple came and said, "How can I love God enough?" And the master took him to the river, and he held him under the water. And the disciple eventually began to fight and kick to try and come up. And finally, when he went limp, the master pulled him up. And he just took this great breath. And the master said to the disciple, when you want God as much as you wanted that breath, you will know and experience God. To me, that was always, that story just kind of stuck with me. And I heard that story many, many years ago. And I think about this oftentimes. Have I really wanted to experience the divine that much? As I wanted to experience that breath? I think there are times in my life I have. Sometimes the times in my life where I really wanted to experience the divine that much is when I felt like my head was underwater and I couldn't breathe. You know those times? We've all had those times, haven't we? And I think it was a very powerful reminder that, part of our life experiences are there for the purpose of helping us wake up to that possibility of something more, of something greater, that can work in and through us and in and through those experiences. And so as we begin to open ourselves to the possibility of loving God, we also need to be open to the possibility that in order to do that, we have to be willing and able to let that energy of love in and through us. And we do that by loving ourselves. You see, the reality is when we love ourselves, we're allowing the presence of God as love to express through us as love for ourselves. Let me say that again because it sounds a little twisted, but I want you to hear it. When we are loving ourselves, we're allowing the energy of God, the presence of God, to express through us as love for ourselves. And when we're not doing that, when we are not allowing ourselves to feel love for who we are, we're basically saying no to the divine, aren't we? Aren't we? Jesus said, God is love, and they that abide in love abide in God. And if we're not abiding in love for ourselves, we're basically saying, no thanks, God. No thanks, divine. No thanks, Spirit. But when we are allowing that energy of love to flow through us as love for ourselves, yes, and one of my teachers many years ago used to say, we need to learn to love our neighbor, warts and all, and I'm going to suggest to you we need to learn to love ourselves, warts and all. And that means, as Louise Hay says, never, ever, ever criticizing ourselves. Whoa. Wait a minute. How am I ever going to improve or get better or if I don't criticize myself? I know the thoughts that come up. But the reality is none of us really ever changes or grows spiritually through criticism. It just doesn't work that way. In fact, the more we criticize ourselves, the more we stunt our development and growth. What we do is we're resisting something within us that's there to try and help us move into a deeper, richer experience of the presence of love in ourselves. Not an easy thing to do, but it's a simple step. All you got to do is love God, right? Love yourself. Love your neighbor. Oh, wait a minute now, wait a minute. You remember that guy, that jerk down the road? You got to be kidding me. That politician that I just can't stand, you know the one, or ones. Yes, absolutely. So what are some ways that we can love our neighbor? One, acts of kindness, certainly. Some of the spiritual work that the outreach work that we do here, but also just, holding loving thoughts for that matter, holding positive thoughts, wanting the best for someone who perhaps is really, part of their work at this time is to feel and to express being a jerk. We know we've got a few of those in our lives, right? And it's okay. That's part of what the work they have to do at this point. We've all had our times, haven't we? We've all been that way at different times, right? And so it's just an opportunity for us to be open to the possibility of healing. Healing that within ourselves, healing that with each other. Forgiveness is certainly a big part of that. And then also to begin to appreciate others, even those that we find difficulty appreciating. Sometimes that's the biggest work, isn't it? Sometimes that's the most valuable healing that can happen, is learning to shift our thoughts and feelings and energies about those that we have the most difficulty with. We've been working with the work on the shadow on Saturdays, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Learning to recognize that the things that we are having difficulty in accepting and appreciating and loving about others in our lives and our world are really a reflection of something in us that we're having difficulty loving and accepting, right? And so part of our waking up to an awareness of our oneness in spirit is open to the possibility of a greater good in seeing that there's something within this experience with the other and what we're seeing that we don't like that is for us to heal within ourselves. So I want to kind of wrap things up a bit with a story. It was a Christian monastery back about 20 years ago, maybe a little longer, and they were actually having some real challenges. The monks had begun to become very argumentative among themselves, and they were starting to gripe about all the work that they were having to do, and the numbers in the monastery began to dwindle, and some of the monks asked to leave the monastery and they weren't able to attract any new novices into the ministry. And the abbot of the ministry was really concerned about this, and the monastery, and he was actually friends with an old rabbi who lived up on the hill, and so he went up to visit his rabbi friend one time, and he says, Rabbi, they were having dinner, and he said, we're having a lot of troubles. And he kind of explained some of the things that were going on. He said, the rabbi said, don't worry, not to worry. I had a very important dream last night, and my dreams always come true. And in the dream, the Messiah came, and lo and behold, it was someone living in your monastery. And the abbot said, really? Someone living in our monastery? I mean, the Messiah? But the Messiah's already come. He says, yes, I know. Sure. Yeah. But didn't he say he was going to come again? And the abbot said, well, yeah, he said he was going to come again. He says, well, my dreams always come true. The Messiah is coming again in your very monastery. And the next day he told all the monks this good news. He told them that the Messiah was going to appear in their monastery. And the monks began to look around at each other and wonder. And then a month later, the rabbi had invited the abbot to come back, and he asked the abbot how things were going. And he said, oh, it's wonderful. You just won't believe it. You just won't believe how wonderful and how great everything is. I mean, the monks are so gracious and loving with each other. They're so much happier. They're dedicated to their work. They're calling, and they brought in 5 new novices, and ever since that we learned that the Messiah was coming, and we all wondered which one could be the Messiah. And the rabbi smiled and said, see, my dreams always come true. He said, well, what do you mean? Can you not see, my friend? Look around you. The Messiah has come. See, the moment that we look for that presence in each other, in our life, in our world, we become that presence. Wouldn't you agree? So that's our homework for this week. The Messiah is coming, and it's looking for you to find it. Within you, within your life, within your world. And so it is. Namaste. Let's move into our meditation time. Yes.
Okay, so we have more to come.
Nope. Love God, love yourself, love your neighbor, love your enemy.
Oh, okay. There's 4 in there.
There's 4 in there. Lisa, I'm sure there are probably 5, but let's work with 4 for now. So let's move into a comfortable place as we begin our meditation time. Just breathe into the heart space. Be open and receptive to the inflow and the outflow of our breath, and to the expanding energy of love in our hearts. Feeling that energy of an expanding consciousness of love, of grace, of benevolence. Being willing to allow that energy to pour through us as love for our source, the source of all love. Presence of God within us, and as it flows through us, as us. And seeing through the eyes of that light, of that love, of that presence, looking outward into the eyes of our neighbors, those closest to us, our children, our spouses, our parents, our families, our tribe. and seeing through the eyes of that love, of heart, of spirit, even beyond the boundaries. Even beyond the boundaries of our tribe, our nation, our country, our world. Being open to knowing and feeling the presence of God. Through everything that we see, and through the one that is seeing. Let your heart be filled with a feeling of gratitude for knowing the possibilities of experiencing the one presence and the one power even more deeply, more fully, more completely. And abiding in a consciousness and awareness of the presence of the Messiah, the chosen vision and consciousness of love in all and through all. Thank you. Thank you, Blessed One, Blessed Spirit, Blessed Being, Blessed Light, Blessed Presence. Take another nice deep breath now. Give thanks. Let your heart be fully open to knowing and feeling even more of that experience and that expanding consciousness of love flowing through. Take another nice deep breath, and when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And seeing through your eyes the presence of